Hello my dear students, welcome to the revision session on standard number 230. Standard number 230 deals with audit documentation. Now as a part of the revision, let us understand some of the key areas in the standard number 230 where auditor and auditor team during the course of the audit and from the beginning till end, whatever the audit procedures they performed and whatever the conclusions they have reached finally and whatever the methods they have applied, they need to keep it in separate document files. Now you can see in the picture where audit and auditor team, they are doing some verifying some documents, and whatever the documents have been verified, they have to keep in a folders or files. We will discuss in this particular standard. Now what SA 230 deals? SA 230 talks about audit documentation, which deals with auditor's responsibility to prepare the audit documentation for an audit of financial statements. So whose responsibility to prepare the documentation means it is the auditor responsibility to prepare the documentation. When I say auditor responsibility, who should not involve here? Management should not involve in the documentation process, because this entire process should be done by the auditor only. Now audit documentation is nothing but a record. We are going to record something, we are going to keep something. What the record we are going to do? We are going to record three items in the particular documentation. Number one is audit procedures performed for financial statements of the company during the course of the audit. So we have different audit procedures like inquiry, then inspection, then external confirmation, then recalculation, then reperformance, observation, then analytical procedures. So auditor need to record what kind of procedures he has applied during the course of the audit in order to carry out the audit in a efficient and effective manner. Then auditor should record audit evidences collected during the course of the audit. What is the meaning of the audit evidence? It is nothing but information to be collected by the auditor during the course of the audit. Now, whatever the information auditor is collected, he need to document in a separate file. Finally, the audit documentation should also record the conclusions reached by the auditor. So, what is the meaning of conclusion? The final judgment of the auditor, which will be expressed in the form of opinion. So when the final judgment will be given by the auditor, he need to have some base for judgment. The base is nothing but evidences. How auditor can collect the evidences? By applying audit procedures. So this is the flow where students can understand conclusions are based on audit evidences. Audit evidences can be obtained based on audit procedures. So reverse approach you can understand. Now audit documentation is also called as audit working papers or audit work papers, which can be tested for the MCQ based questions. Then the objective of the auditor is to prepare the audit documentation that provides sufficient and appropriate record, which will be a basis for the auditor report and evidence that audit was planned and performed in accordance with the standards in auditing. So there is one standard which requires that auditor should plan for an audit of financial statements. The standard is nothing but SA 300 standard. What SA 300 told? SA 300 has told to the auditor, it is the auditor responsibility to prepare a perfect plan before commencement of the audit. Now, what is the plan he has prepared? How he has executed? How he has reached the conclusions? So all these things to be recorded in the documentation process. So what are the various forms and what it contains and what extent of, that means what is the percentage of documentation is depend upon number of factors. number of factors. It may change from organization to organization. It may change from the assignment to assignment as well. Now audit documentation may be recorded on various modes. Now because we are living in a digital era, it can be recorded in a electronic form. Like I can keep it in the Google Drive, I can keep it in the OneDrive, like that I can store my data. Or else I can prepare in the paper format. I can collect the papers, then I can keep it in the box files so that it can be stored in my office. So physically. Third one, other media which can be used for the pen drive or a hard disk, etc. So audit documentation can be recorded in three ways. One is paper format, second one is electronic format, third one is other format, other media. Now auditor shall prepare the audit documentation on timely basis. Very, very important for examination. So as and when the audit is completed, he need to prepare the documentation for the easy purpose, Now preparing sufficient and appropriate audit documentation on timely basis helps the auditor to enhance the quality of the audit. So again, when we talk about quality, there is another standard number 220, line with SQC1, which talks about quality controls of the auditor and quality controls of the audit firm. So when I see the documentation, it can prove that, it can be evidenced that audit has been planned and audit has been qualitatively conducted. Now, quality of audit and facilitates the effective review and evaluation of audit evidences which has been collected by the auditor, and conclusions, that is judgment, before the audit report is finalized by the auditor. So this documentation provides all these advantages to the auditor. Next comes to the audit file. So audit file may be defined as one or more folders. That means I am keeping folder by folder. Example, if this is called as a file, I can keep inside various folders. So this I am calling it as a file. So this I call it as a folder. This I call it as a folder. Now audit file may be defined as one or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic and containing records that comprises audit documentation for a specific assignment. Point to be noted here is, for each and every specific assignment, auditor has to maintain separate audit file for easy reference. How a CA student keeps separate notebooks for writing of the summary notes, for writing of the important points for easy reference, and exactly similar lines, here also auditor has to keep separate audit files for the separate assignments. Now comes to auditor shall assemble this audit documentation. Assembling means bringing all the documentation into the one place, because during the course of the audit, auditor can assign the work to the various audit team members. So when the audit team members completed their respective assignment, whatever given, or part of the work whatever is given, now that should be assembled and kept at one place. Now who has to assemble means the auditor has to assemble the audit documentation in an audit file and complete the administrative process, that means which is assembling the final audit file on timely basis after the date of the audit report. Why it is called as administrative process? Because once everything is completed, once audit is completed, then I am going to start the assembling process. That means after the audit report is given, auditor is going to start the administrative process. Hence, so once the assembling process, during the course of the assembling process, there is not going to be any changes to the audit report, because audit report is already given by the auditor. Now that's what the given. Very important for examination. The time limit given to complete the assembly of the final audit file is not more than 60 days after the date of audit report. So once audit report is given, I am going to start the assembling process. Assembling process means collection of all documentation into a single file. Now these process takes some time. The time limit given to the auditor is 60 days time limit is given to the auditor. 60 days when after the audit report is given. Now what is the consequence of this? Now the complete assembly of audit file, assembly of the final audit file after the date of auditor's report is an administrative process that does not involve any performance of new procedures or drawing of new conclusions, because audit is already completed. Audit is already completed because we are taking up the administrative process of collection of all documents for the keep it in a separate file. Hence there is no question of applying the audit procedures or no question of giving the new opinion on the financial statements. Now comes to after the assembly of audit file which has been completed by the auditor, auditor shall not delete or shall not discard the audit documentation of any nature before the end of his retention period. So once assembling process is completed, auditor has kept the everything in one file, he should not delete unless there is a duplication. Example, I given the work, same work to the two audit members. Two audit members have done the same assignment and they given the two different files. Two different files have the same data. There is no purpose of keeping same data. Hence, I can delete one file because it is a duplication. So one file I have to keep. So I need to maintain this for the retention period. Now time comes to what is retention period. Retention period means period up to which auditor has to keep this documentation with him. Now the retention period of the documentation for audit engagement is ordinarily is not less than 7 years from the date of audit report. So once audit report is given, I need to maintain this documentation with me with auditor office now for a period of 7 years. For a period of 7 years. Now who has given the clarification for these 7 years? So standard number 230 which talks about documentation, but standard number 230 does not answer for how many years auditor has to keep the documentation. Now the 7 years duration which has been answered by the SQC1, you may be tested in the examination. So auditor has to retain the documentation for a period of 7 years as per option number A, SQC1, option number B, standard number 230, option number C, SA 240, option number D, SA 220. They may give 4 options. So SQC1, then they may give the SA 230, then 240, then 220. They given 4 options. Now the 7 years period is given by the SQC1. Even though the standard is been dealt by the SA 230, but the retention period has been clarified by the standard number SQC1. Now comes to the ownership of the documentation. Who is the owner of the audit working papers? Now again, who is the owner of the audit working papers is clarified by the SQC1, not by the standard number 230. One more testing question for examination. So audit documentation is the property of the auditor, hence owner of the documentation is auditor. Now audit documentation is the property of auditor. Now who has clarified this? SQC1 has been clarified this. Now auditor may, even though auditor is the owner of this documentation, auditor may, it is not mandatory, it may or may not. Auditor may at his own interest make a portion, that means part of, or extract, that means xerox of audit documentation available to the clients. So if auditor is willing to give the documentation process, auditor can give. Auditor is not willing to give, auditor may not give. It is the will and wish of the auditor whether he can give the photocopies or he can give the part of the working papers based on his interest. Now provided such disclosure does not undermine, that means does not compromise validity of the work, then independence of auditor. If I share my documentation process, it should not compromise the validity of the work performed. It should not damage the independence concept of the auditor, which is one of the key concept as far as audit is concerned. Now let us go for testing of your knowledge, dear friends. So let us summarize in 1 minute everything. Very simple. Audit documentation is nothing but audit preparing of the documents in a single file. Now audit documentation refers to recording of the three areas. One is audit procedures, audit evidences, then conclusions. Audit documentation is also called as working papers and work papers. Then audit documentation can be in the paper form, electronic form, other media. Then auditor has to prepare the audit documentation in timely basis. Then audit file may be defined as one or more folders in or other storage media, and every specific engagement auditor has to maintain separate audit files. Then auditor has to assemble the audit file, which can be called as administrative process, which is within the period of 60 days after the date of audit report. Then the completion of the assembling does not involve further audit procedures or new conclusions. Then after assembly of audit file, auditor should not delete unless there is duplication. Then auditor has to retain this audit documentation for a period of 7 years as per SQC1. Then auditor is the owner of the working papers. At his own interest, he can make it available to the client, and he should ensure that there is no damage to the work performed and there is no damage to the independence as well. Now let us come to the test your knowledge. Now it is time for all of you to test your knowledge. Question number 1. What is the purpose of audit documentation? What is the purpose of audit documentation? Now option number A, it provides evidence of audit procedures. That means in case of any negligence brought against auditor, it can act as evidence that auditor has really performed the work. It supports the auditor conclusions. Yes, 100% correct. It is also correct. It is also correct. It helps with supervision and review of responsibilities. Now who has done what work? There may be different team members. Then this also correct. Now what is the answer for the given question? The purpose is A, B, C. The answer is all of the above. Now come to the how long, that means what is the period auditor should maintain the audit documentation. What is the period? 7 years. From which period? From the end of the audit report. Now 5 years. Let me take the 5 years. Five years, wrong answer. 10 years, wrong answer. 3 years also wrong answer. Then what is left over? Option number B, which is 7 years. So what is the retention period documentation? 7 years. So B is the right answer. Then comes to the another question. What is the appropriate time limit to complete the assembling of audit file? So final audit file. So when auditor has to complete this? Within a period of 30 days, wrong answer. 45 days, wrong answer. 90 days, wrong answer. It is the 60 days after the date of audit report. Answer is C. So these are the some of the questions for your testing purpose. So finally, focus. You should focus. Then you should get motivation. Then you should dedicate yourself for your goals, but don't give the excuses, so that you can achieve your goals. So thank you, my dear friends, for watching this video. So we thought this video has given a good clarity on the audit documentation, where you can easily revise for examination purpose. So thank you all. So have a good day.